Hello and welcome to the second English video in the series A Christian Pastor in Quebec. The second video was probably more needed in French than in English, because the subject of the second video is what exactly is a pastor, and the reason I had to explain that in French and explain that to the French speakers in Quebec is because the culture has been so overwhelmingly Roman Catholic, and you probably are aware that in the Roman Catholic Church of the West, priests are not allowed to be married. And so when I came here and I introduced myself as a pastor, people really didn't know how to react to that. They didn't really know that word. Just a kind of a small anecdote. Very early on after moving here, I joined a baseball team, a softball team in the summer, and so obviously I was, quite an oddity. Here's an English guy on this French softball team in the local neighborhood. And when they started asking me, well, what do you do for a living? I said, well, I'm a pastor. And I saw very quickly they didn't really know what to do with that. They kind of started to try to formulate ideas, but part of the problem was they thought, well, you're a priest, and then they'd look up in the not the grandstand, but the the benches, whatever. I can't think of the word in English. And they'd see Nancy, and they'd think, this guy's married, priests don't marry. Then the next year I was playing, they'd look up there, and if Nancy was present watching a game, she was holding Stephanie. And so eventually, from what I remember, they started kind of jokingly calling me the married priest. And it was fascinating. It was such a novelty. That's the word I was looking for. Such a novelty for them. And so I discovered, however, that every person I met was positive about the church leader, a priest, being married. I can't think of one person who didn't say to me, that's good. You understand our lives. You understand where we're coming from. And of course, not only are you married, you have children, so you know where we're living. So it was a real window into Quebec society that from the point of the average French Quebecer, their leadership, the priests, the nuns, etc., didn't understand their lives, didn't understand the daily lives of, John Doe or, Cheryl Smith. They just couldn't, right? But I did. And they were very, very positive about that. It is interesting that obviously as I've answered it a little more based on the Bible, I've been telling them, in the New Testament, actually it's quite clear, and I don't necessarily tell them 1 Timothy 3, but that it's quite clear in the letter of Paul to Timothy that a church leader should be married. In fact, it's where we learn about life. It's where we get experience. Paul writes to Timothy, if a person can't lead his family, how will he ever be able to lead the church? And so in Quebec, for generations, they had men and women, unmarried, not leading families, and yet, quote unquote, leading the church. And that's a concern, and that caused certain, obviously, problems. So that's really how I began to establish an identity and explain what it was. I would say I can be married, and that's what it means, and this is what I learned as a husband, as a father. And as I said, very, very good reactions on the part of French Quebecers. In the next video, what I'd like to get into is some of the other maybe critical similarities and differences in Roman Catholicism and evangelical Christianity. Because that too, obviously, very early on in my relationships with people, that question would be asked. Why? What are the differences, right? How does what you believe differ from how we were raised? So I'll get into that in the third English video.